Hello everybody, my name is Liam Walken and today we are going to be completely transforming this bathroom. This was a really fun project because the homeowners had actually gone on vacation for 3 weeks, handed us the keys and basically said, hey, give us a new bathroom, and we did our best to make that happen. Starting off by removing the larger fixtures, trying to get some floor space. Not really as necessary with this project, but nonetheless, it's how we started off. And then before the demo even begins, of course, we have the water shut off to the house with the drains emptied. We have ram board from the bathroom all the way to the front door. And then we have some dust management going, so the air registers in the vicinity just blocked up, and then an air scrubber outside sucking all the dust out. Now, if underneath your vanity you don't have a drain system like this, it could just all be glued together. You could always just cut it out with a Sawzall, but in this case, I could just kind of unscrew it. Still cutting it anyways because this all needs to be redone, and this is not for the faint of heart. Yikes. These countertops are typically just kind of adhered down, in this case not very well, which makes our lives easier. And then getting the vanity out as well. In most cases, these are going to be screwed into the wall. Again, the previous installer didn't believe in fasteners, I guess. Which is good for us. And I had to do something about the smell here. Good old car air freshener. And then for the giant tub that was existing here, taking a couple screwdrivers to get that drain out, unscrewing the overflow. And then with these style tubs, typically just a bead of silicone around the bottom. So we cut that out and we could get this tub out. Looking back at this footage, it's really interesting to me to see just how small the previous installer made that shower. I mean, this was only 10 years ago that this bathroom was built, and to have this much space available and to build a little coffin style shower is just crazy to me. It's also usually at this point in the video in which I feel like the Europeans get extremely agitated. There's something about 2x4s and drywall that just really gets them going. So to all the European homies out there, just go touch your concrete walls and feel better. And speaking of planning, here is how I do mine. This is a program called SketchUp. You can download a free version of it if you want to experiment. And it's just a really useful tool for kind of showing the clients possible layouts, ideas, and then having a back and forth with them in making any modifications. I find it's just really useful for most people to be able to visualize these things. And on top of that, we can kind of go over some measurements and then have plans for when we're framing and laying things out for where everything needs to go, how much materials to order, and it's just kind of a general good tool to have. With any existing water lines, I like to cap them if they're being relocated. So in this case, we're dealing with PEX, but the process for copper is very similar because to cap them, I'm always using these temporary shark bite end caps, just really useful for demolition purposes. Sometimes when I rewatch certain clips, it makes me really relieved that it's over, and this is one of those. When you rip up a flooring, you never really know what you're getting into, and in this case, we had 3 layers to get through. So we had the original hardwood flooring, and then we had a scratch coat of lath, and then on top of that, there was plywood, and then the tiled floor on that. And this is pretty brutal. We just had the 3-foot pry bar going, ripping it up layer by layer, and eventually we got there, but man, was this a lot of work. Eventually we did find the subfloor and then just removing all of these staples from the old hardwood to make sure it's nice and clean. Now pretty much none of the electrical and plumbing components are going to stay where they are. So this means opening up more walls and getting access so that we can fix and relocate everything. And with this wall here, we were putting a pocket door in, but upon opening it up, found out that the framing was done sideways. So we would have to end up building a false wall in front of that to house our pocket door. But no worries, it is what it is. And this is the back wall of the shower, which we are going to be just giving a rough opening for a 48-inch niche. I like to make my openings bigger for the rough framing side of things. That way, once we have tile up, I can cut it out to the exact size I need. And fear not, this is a non-load bearing wall, hence why we can just take out those studs like that. Always check though. I'm not here to tell you how to determine if yours is or isn't. Just know that in this case, we were good to go. And of course, we are doing a curbless shower, which means recessing the subfloor in the shower area. So we take a skill saw and set it to the depth of these planks. That way we can open it up as necessary. And then we're going to be opening up a few other spots as well. This is just to make changes to the mechanical layout of things. So that was just the plumbing and that register there. Cutting back a few more PEX lines as is necessary. Again, a lot of this is just going to be relocated, so sometimes it's easier to start with like a blank slate, you can say. And the same thing with the drain here. Don't need that stubbed out in the shower, believe it or not. So just extending it to be a straight piece now. With our water lines here, there are 3 spots that we need to pick up. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing now, that is the one side of the shower controls. We're going to run it across to the other side, and there we're going to tee it. So the tee, one way, is going to go up to the other side of the shower, to the second control, and across the bathroom to the tub filler, which is going to be on the right-hand side there. So while I was working on the plumbing, Sebastian here was framing up this new wall for the pocket door. And I believe that the rough opening here was 62 inches wide by 84 inches in height. Although, of course, this is going to depend on the pocket door kit you're using and the size of door. And then just a couple of relocations here, getting the register moved over to make room for the tub. And also relocating this toilet. So because we had to frame out that new wall, we have to adjust the location for that. But also we're switching the orientation of this toilet. So we do need the center of it. In our case, we moved it to be 16 inches from the center of this flange to that wall on the left. This is the recessing of the shower, and I do have an in-depth video on this if you want to learn about it in detail. But effectively, we're just sistering these 2x4s up so that we insert our new plywood. The top of the plywood will be flush with the top of those joists. Sebastian just framing up a new wall for behind that toilet, trying to get it symmetrical, and then it's also housing the mechanical stuff behind it. The drain for the tub, very simple, just coming over to the center of the window where the tub will sit, and then continuing on to the right so it can be vented into the attic. This is the rough-in for the tub filler. Really cool piece of equipment here. It's by Moen, and after bolting it into these joists, it just felt really, really solid, and I was really impressed by the quality here. Here is the drain, or should I say drains, for the shower. Because it is so big, we did end up going with 2, and coming over with a 2-inch line, and then it gets wet vented again in 2-inch, brought up into the attic and tied into the vents there. Now looking back at this, I do wish it looks like we had another couple inches we could have gone to the left for these drains, had them a little more central in the shower. So I wish we would have done that. Not a big deal, it all worked out in the end, but it just would have been a little more central. And while I don't show it on camera, keep in mind with all of the plumbing work here, whether it's drains or water lines, this all gets tested before things are closed up. So rest easy, don't worry, that is done. For the drain access, we use a 5-inch hole saw, and we have the drill in reverse. Reason being, when you're making a hole this big in plywood, it can catch really easily, and you don't want to break your wrists, so having it in reverse, you can still get through it just fine. More relocations, as mentioned. This back wall just being completely redone. The electrical especially was really bad here, but the drains right now, it's just because of a relocation more than anything, so getting a double Y there so we can get the stub outs where they need to go for our new vanity. And then as I'm working on the water line stub outs here, have Sebastian framing up this wall here for the shower. This is going to house the shower controls. The reason why we're doing this is on the other side of the shower, it's next to your wall, so we wanted to avoid running water lines in that wall. So instead we framed out a new wall, and to keep it symmetrical, we did the same on both sides. And it's just going to provide some nice access for us anyways. These are the shower valves, and we're using PEX, so we need to adapt it to PEX. So to do this, using 3 to 4 revolutions of Teflon per fitting in a combination of pipe dope. And that way we can get our fitting on there, tighten it up, and then use channel locks to really make sure it's snug. That way we can just simply crimp our PEX onto each piece, and we're ready to go. Symmetry is a really big deal when it comes to this shower, so using a laser level to make sure everything's perfect. Can kind of establish a line for both the shower controls on each side, the shower head in the center position, as well as both rain heads on either side. To mount everything, using some 2x4 blocking, so for both of the shower heads, the rain head above and the handheld on the right, just using these drop ears, and then eventually our shower heads will screw into those. And for the mixing valve, the depth of these is usually quite important. In ours, it worked out such that the 2x4 is framed sideways, the back was flush with the adjacent framing. However, be sure to double check yours and make sure that you're getting the depth correct. On top of this, we're using these hammer arresters on each side. That's just going to reduce some of the noise and help alleviate some of the pressure on those lines when you're turning off and on that water. Framing out this monster of a shower bench running wall to wall, which is really cool, using a laser just to establish that line there. And then the next part of this bench being framed a little bit smaller so that we can pitch the top of it towards the drain. It's really important to do that. You don't necessarily have to do it with your framing. You can, of course, do it with the tiling, but I find it's just a little easier with a bench this size. And then that way too, any water that happens to get under the tile can eventually find its way on the waterproofing towards the drain. And then sheathing the top of it here with 3/4 inch ply. For these pony walls, they're being constructed out of 2x4 framing. We got some blocking going in on the adjacent walls for each one. And then in terms of building the walls themselves, we have 4 L brackets in each of the 4 corners. And then to fasten them to the floor below and the wall adjacent, using the GRK screws to really get a nice tight bond. And a lot of the strength for these walls is going to happen once you sheath both the front and back face of them. Now, as you can see, the existing ceilings were just brutal. There was no fixing this, and rather than tear it all down, deal with a mess of insulation, what we did instead was just strap the ceiling here with these 1x3s, shimming it out whenever possible. That way, just try and level it off a little bit, make it nicer. And then this way we can get all new drywall up and ensure that we never have to deal with any cracking again. And you will notice some tuck tape put on top of the existing ceiling facing us. Fear not, that's just temporary. It was to keep the insulation from raining down until we could fix the vapor barrier later on. So that's kind of the logic there, just keeping everything clean as we work. Before continuing on with the project, I just want to give thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. Now, it's no secret that renovations can be expensive, and as such, it can be incredibly valuable in having some help saving for one. And that's where Rocket Money comes in. Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance platform that helps you save more and spend less. By using Rocket Money, you'll be able to easily set up budgets that monitor your spending by category and send you notifications for when you've exceeded them. Let's be real here. Budgeting can take a lot of discipline, but by having Rocket Money at your disposal, it becomes so much more straightforward. You'll also be able to cancel any unwanted subscriptions with just a tap. I know I have personally found myself with subscriptions for services that I no longer used. But with Rocket Money, these subscriptions will be safely and securely identified so that you have a better idea of where your money is going. So do yourself a favor and download Rocket Money and unlock more features with premium. Go to rocketmoney.com/workinwithwalkin or click the link in the video description. Finally, we could cover up that disgusting old tongue and groove style subfloor, get some new plywood on top of this, and there's a whole kind of equation to figure out what depth to get with the various substrates going down. In this case, we wanted that landing area at the stairs to be flush with the new floor in this bathroom, so we're putting on 1/2 inch ply. That's one, to get the levels right, but also to strengthen up the existing subfloor down below. And to do this, we're just gluing and nailing it down. And before we actually even did this, we did go ahead and use flooring screws on every single plank there, on every single joist, to just ensure everything was nice, tight, and squeak free. And then even here in the shower to get, once again, our heights the right depth, using this 1/4 inch ply as well. This is the Johnson Hardware 1500 Soft Close Series pocket door kit, and it was really nice. In the past, I'd used a Home Depot kit, which was just awful. This was a huge upgrade from that. It felt really strong, and the soft close feature was really, really nice. And then to finish it all off, we put in this solid door. So it just felt like a really, really smooth door. Really happy with this. Here's just a brief look at the mechanical side of things if you're interested in that. So here we have our drains, long sweep 90s heading towards that double Y, orange test caps to stop any sewer gas from coming out until we hook our traps up to this later on. The bottom side, we have 2 wires buried in the wall. That's for the plugs. I like to bury the wires until the vanity's in so I can cut them out to be perfectly symmetrical. And they are going below the countertop with this vanity. It's what the clients requested. And then up above, we have 2 wires for the wall sconces. Once again, burying them until later on. For our PEX stub out for the toilet there, just using the bracket here and then capping it for the time being. Pocket door, as discussed, we have this really nice steel frame for it, which really adds a lot of rigidity and just really nice install. For the electrical side of things, we have a 4-gang here. So we'll have the Potlights, the wall sconces, the towel warmer, and the fan all controlled, and then a thermostat for the floor heat. So we go down for that with 2 half-inch ENT conduits to the floor. And then we're building this linen closet as well, and inside we're housing both the amp for the speaker in the ceiling. And then on top of that, we have these 2 wires, a Romex and a low voltage, the brown wire there, 18.2. So the Romex goes from the switch bank. So say you turn on your pot lights, it's going to send power up that wire into the linen closet where there will be a driver. The driver will convert the 120 volt into 24 volt, which will send that along the brown low voltage wire through the ceiling, eventually coming down and powering up the niche lights. As you can see, the connections left there until that gets put in. The last thing is that towel warmer wire, which we just left buried in this half wall till it's hooked up later on. And with that, we could finally start boarding things up. So we have this regular 1/2-inch drywall for the ceilings and 1/2-inch green board for everywhere else. The reason for the non-green board on the ceilings is just stronger. We want to ensure that this is going to remain crack-free, unlike the last ceiling. So doing what we can to make that happen. Using green board in the shower as well, as we will be using the Schluter membrane style system. And I think that may be the last time I do it this way. It's just, it's a lot of thin set, you know? The less thin set I have to work with, the better. So probably going to be moving more towards board style systems in the future, but we'll see how it plays out. And we did sheathe the right pony wall there, that one face with plywood. Reason being is that there will be a towel warmer there eventually, so I just wanted some backing to be able to mount that into. This is the Fitz flush exhaust mount. Really cool system. Gives a nice seamless look to your ceiling. So cutting it out for the rough opening, adding some blocking all around it, and then I mounted the exhaust mount to the Panasonic Whisper fan, which is what I'm using here. And then I added blocking all around that so I could have something to mount it to, and then hooked up the mechanical components. And I did also recommend to the homeowner that they deal with the attic issue, which is, of course, the duct should be insulated, as well as the just attic in general. Should really get some new insulation in there because it was bare bones. For the floor here, we will be using Dietra Heat Peel and Stick. Really nice membrane, but before we put it down, we want to make sure that the subfloor is really clean. So give it a good vacuum, damp sponge, just get any dust off, and then let it all dry before just cutting this Dietra Peel and Stick with a knife. And then, as the name would suggest, peeling and sticking. Really beautiful install. And then this way we could install all of our heating cable, just using a 2-3 spacing, getting it everywhere where there would be foot traffic, and of course giving a spacing around the existing floor register, as well as any plumbing fixtures and walls. And then just fishing up both the heating cable wire to the thermostat box, as well as the 2 probe wires. And it's just a 4x4 deep box with a plaster ring on it. You don't want to cut the heating cable there once you get it up there, but the 2 probe wires can be shortened if necessary. This is just some sheetrock 45, which gets mixed up with some water, and then we use this to pre-fill any of our larger gaps and cracks that may have occurred during the boarding process. So as you can see here, anything like that, we just want to fill with some of this compound. That way, when we go to tape it eventually, it's just going to be stronger and less prone to any cracking. This is an island tub drain, makes for a really easy install if you're using a freestanding tub. Highly recommend it. So to get it all into place, just kind of put it into the rough opening, measure the distance from the trap down below to this, cut a piece of pipe, glue it all in place, and then screw it down. And then came the waterproofing, and this really sucked. It was just such a big shower, and with the Curdy membrane style system, I like it for smaller showers. I think it's a really nice system. It's cost effective, easy to use. It's a lot of work though, and that gets reflected a lot more in a shower of this size. It's just a lot of thin set to work with, to mix up, to trowel out, to collapse, to cover your arms in. So just, it wasn't ideal, but got through it and got there in the end. For the installation of this, it's just taking a damp sponge to your substrate, troweling out the thin set. I used Schluter's All Set for this with the Curdy trowel. Directional troweling, get your membrane on there, just kind of push it down a little bit with your hands, and then take a drywall knife, collapse all those ridges, get any excess air out from underneath it. And for any corners or areas where I couldn't overlap the sheets, using the inside and outside corners that they make, as well as the banding. And of course, we have 2 pans going into this giant shower. And in hindsight, I think a linear drain could have been really nice here, but we did just go for the center drain option here. We did use the Tileable drain grate, which was cool for the Hexagon tiles that eventually are going in. But as you can see, just getting those pans in, and then once we have good coverage, collapse all those ridges below, kind of go ahead and put the banding along all the corners, as well as, of course, the corners in the corners. Because there are 2 shower pans, it's necessary, of course, to waterproof where they meet. Not only that, but this is a curbless shower, so waterproofing where the Ditra meets the shower pans there. And then going above and beyond, waterproofing well outside of the shower area, those 2 half walls as well. Now with a traditional curbed shower, you have a self-contained pan, so you're able to easily flood test it. With this curbless shower, however, we cannot. So I got this 2x4 down there, ran some banding along it as well as a couple corners. That way the next day we would have sort of a self-made curb that we can use to flood test this shower. And then we were able to get a couple drain plugs in, fill this bad boy up with 3 buckets of water, mark it with a pencil line at that water level, and then let it sit for the first half of the day, over 4 hours, making sure that we didn't have a leak there. Ideally you'd be testing for 24 hours, but we did not have that kind of time. And while all this was going on, Sebastian was just knocking it out with this mudding process here. So he used the super taper here to get all the taping done, and then doing more and more coats, getting it closer towards that finish line, feathering out these joints, just getting it real smooth in here. And again, after about 4 hours, we drained the shower area here, removed that 2x4, kind of cleaned out any excess thin set, and then we were able to put that piece of banding back down to cover the screw holes from where that 2x4 was mounted. With that, we could start tiling. So using these nice 12x24 tiles here, got the Ruby snap cutter to make the majority of our cuts. Anything that could not be done with that was done with a grinder, and then just dry fitting our first 3 rows. Went with a staggered pattern here, which was really nice, and using 1/16 grout joints with a wedge style system. Using a 1/2 inch square notch trowel to get everything down. And then also I have this sort of suction cup vibrating tool that's really going to help collapse all those ridges and ensure that we have really good coverage. You can see that Sebastian's back buttering each tile before it's placed, and I'm using a toothbrush as well to clean out any excess thin set that comes out of those grout joints. It's just a lot easier to remove it now versus the next day once it's hardened. With these curbless style showers, something I also like doing is just taking some silicone and getting it underneath that where the tile meets the shower floor tiles. Just an extra level of barrier. That way any water that gets underneath the shower floor tile, instead of having the chance to wick outside of the shower, it's going to be trapped in that shower pan. Typically, sanding is a very miserable time, although today, not so much, and that was thanks to our friends at Brave. They were kind enough to send us this drywall vacuum sander, which made the level of dust created in this process a lot more manageable. So I'll put a link down below if you are interested, because typically sanding is one of those things that make me reflect upon my life choices. Building a custom giant niche. This is two 28-inch regular Curdy niches, and I'm ripping them down to my desired size. I believe in this case it was 49 inches in width. The reason being larger than 48 is because we are doing mitered tiled edges, so I need some extra room there to have the beveled faces of the tile meet one another. Taking some brad nails here, cementing them half into the side of the foam, getting a nice big bead of silicone, and then combining these two halves to make the giant niche. At the same time here, prepping all of the LED light stuff. So you can see there the specs for what I'm using, but basically I'm just going to go ahead, measure it out to the rough size of this, maybe a little bit bigger if anything, and then I can strip down the waterproofing on the edge here, exposing those connection points. I can take this low voltage wire and then solder the two wires onto either of those copper pieces that I just showed you. And on the opposite end of these wires, I'm just crimping on these butt splices, and that's what's going to join the light here to the wire buried in the wall. And then tiling the shower floor here. This was a really cool tile, just a 4-inch hexagon tile. Used 1/16 horseshoe spacers. And really important thing here is to make sure that that left side is flush with the large format tiles outside of the shower. So a couple spots, just giving it a little excess thin set to make sure I had everything perfectly flush with one another, and then working my way through the shower. Just using a V-notch trowel to get some thin set on the pan here, and then back buttering each tile, kind of doing a few at a time before spacing them out appropriately. With the drain grates, we're doing the Tileable drain, so really interesting process here. For the time being, I just went ahead and left a perfect square, and then another day I actually tiled the drain grates. I just found it to be a little easier that way. And with that, we could let the fun part begin, and that is, of course, tiling these shower walls using these giant 24 by 48 inch tiles. Love the tiles this size. Very heavy, a little harder to work with, but also very nice to look at. So you can see here prepping the one tile with the mixing valve, using a grinder as well as the cone to get that nice cut done, and then getting that first tile. So established a laser throughout the shower to make sure I could get that first tile really perfect, and then I could start building up from there. Once again, the tile above, using a just diamond hole saw to get that little hole for the handheld stub out there, and again using the cone to clean up the mixing valve cut. Using a 1/2 inch square notch trowel here, getting a nice amount of thin set, back buttering all my pieces, getting them into place, 1/16 grout lines, and then vibrating it all down, ensuring that we have good coverage with these bad boys. And then with those two sidewalls completed, I can shine a laser through the grout line and establish the height for my niche. I'm going to install the niche a little bit lower than that line because I want the bottom tile to overhang the niche so that we can get that mitered edge. And I do want to preface this by saying, at this point in the video, we'd been working some 12-hour days, weekends, trying to get this job done before the clients got back from vacation. So I was a little bit tired here. So that was not ideal, but with every problem there is a solution, and this realistically was just not that bad. An annoyance, but we continue. So I added some blocking around the rest of the niche cutout here, and then I kind of poked a little hole for my low voltage wire at the top right there. And then I got my niche in, added these washers, and fastened it all into place. Then mixed up a little bit more thin set and waterproofed all the seams, and that was that back wall now ready for tile. Speaking of tile, here's how I make my cuts. So for any of these straight rips, using the Ruby Python DC250, cuts it like butter. And then for any of the beveled edge or the miters, using a grinder and just doing it by hand. So with this back wall here, starting off at the bench, and of course, we have 3 tiles going wall to wall, and the tops of them all have that bevel. That way, the corner of the bench will have a really nice transition, and it will have the appearance as if this tile just wraps all the way up this wall. And later on, gonna be doing an epoxy fill for that little corner there. And then you'll notice that for the bench top here, any of the flat pieces, I'm taping down with blue painter's tape to keep that miter nice and tight. But on top of that, I'm troweling out both the bench top as well as the tiles themselves, checking for level the entire time because we do want it pitched in towards the drain. So just a lot to be conscious of as we're doing this. With the layout of the shower, just so happened that we ended up with this 3-inch little strip of tile to start off this first row on the back wall. Is what it is. We used a laser to make sure that this first row is perfectly level and that grout line continues from sidewall to back wall to sidewall. And then we can start working our way up. That middle tile there below the niche does actually extend past the niche, the bottom of the niche a little bit, and then it has a bevel to it. This way, the ultimate goal with this is that the tile in all of the niche is just gonna feel like someone took that niche, pushed it back a little bit, and all the tile is just gonna flow right through it. Even using the same cutout of the tile to put in the back, that way you'll notice all the veining flows right through this back wall. That wasn't just happenstance. No, each tile was selected because of the veining. We made a little map, picked out our tiles, and had that vein continue through the back wall. And then reversing those clamps, as you can see, to support that tile above the niche. And that way can do the entire back wall on the same day and really feel like we're making progress on this project. Now for the niche here, we start with the bottom piece, get a nice amount of thin set below it, and then pitch it out towards the drain, tape up those corners, make sure they're nice and tight, get that back piece on, and then this here is Schluter Deco SG, just a tile profile, and that's gonna house the LED tape light. I get that piece up first, then I do the top piece, get the clamps back in there again to support it, and then I can finish it off with both side pieces. For these half walls here, getting the 6-inch wide threshold pieces for the side and top, pitching that top piece in towards the drain just a little bit there. While I was doing all that tiling, Sebastian was out here doing various touch-ups, priming, painting, all that fun stuff, and the clients actually ended up repainting this because they didn't like there's a bit of a warm tone in the paint color here, so they went with something just slightly like a little more cooler. And we have these tileable drain grates as previously mentioned. So right now my goal is just to kind of set the tiles in place, have those grout lines continue, and then to ensure that enough water can pass through there. Once it sets up, I can kind of shave down the sides as needed. Then getting in the LED lights for the niche here. This is just some heat shrink cable that I put over the connections that I made previously. And then with those butt splices I have on, I can crimp them down onto the wire that comes out through the side of the niche, shove it all back through that same hole, and then adhere the LED lights into the Deco SG. And then I insert this diffuser strip into the Deco SG to help protect those LEDs from any moisture, as well as just help balance out that light spread a little bit. And this here is the driver that converts the 120 volt to 24 volt DC, and I'll have a link to all of these items down below. Finally, moving on to the grouting. This is TEC's Power Grout in Sterling. It's got a built-in sealer, which is always nice, and I was really happy with the quality of this grout, and it worked really nicely with all of the different tiles in this bathroom. In terms of grouting, all I really do here is use a grout float to get it into all of the grout joints, and then I wait maybe 20 minutes or so, come back with a damp sponge, wipe off the majority of the excess, wait another half hour to an hour or so, come back with a dry microfiber cloth and get rid of any of the haze. If you waited a little too long maybe and your haze is really tough to get rid of, you can always use the wax on, wax off technique, which is just a damp sponge in one hand, a microfiber in the other. And I don't mean any disrespect, but Mr. Miyagi should have just had Daniel grouting floors. Would have worked out a lot better, I think. For all of the mitered tiled edges, I'm going to be filling them with an epoxy. And be forewarned, this is only my second time doing this, so I still have a lot to learn. But just starting out by cleaning out all of the joints using some rubbing alcohol here, and then taping them all off so there's just a slight sliver of reveal on the finished edge of that tile. I'm then mixing up this 10X, part A, part B epoxy here, adding the color and trying to get it to match the color of the tile here that it's going up against. Now I only mixed up the two parts in small amounts so I would be able to have enough working time with them. And in the beginning here, I should have let it set up a little bit because it was a little too runny when I first started applying it. As you can see, it kind of dripping from that top part especially. But once I got the majority of the miter filled, I could then go ahead, take off all of this tape before resuming the next day. So this is the next morning with a sharp knife here, just cleaning up any of that overfill or bleed out. I don't know what you want to call that, but just getting it a lot cleaner. And I'm not sure if this was a result of me adding too much of the hardener or just waiting too long to do this step, but I did find it breaking off in kind of almost an uneven way, something I wasn't really completely happy with. So it did require a lot more sanding to get it to be really smooth, but that's okay. In the end, we're able to get a pretty nice product here, just using this 120 grit sandpaper to clean it all up. This is a 400 grit polishing pad just to get rid of the sharp edges on these threshold pieces, add a nice round over. And then as I did that, Sebastian just painting all of the trim, the doors, everything that could be done outside. For Potlights, I personally prefer to install them after the ceiling is finished. That is, if there's attic access above. Reason being is there's just less things to have to paint around. And also it's really easy to get a wire from hole to hole, especially like a situation like this where we have 8 Potlights in this bathroom, all spaced within arm's distance. So you can see I can just kind of reach an arm up one hole, grab the wire through the other hole. It makes it really easy. And this is just beadboard, which we glue and brad nail into place, just finishing off the outside of these pony walls. This is a moisture rated ceiling speaker, really nice, easy install. Speaker wire just plugs right in and then has these little toggles that secure it to the drywall. Then adding in the flange for the toilet. This is just one that sits directly over top of that tile, using a diamond bit to get through the tile and then screwing it down. The screws were temporary. I did eventually get some larger number 12s, so don't worry. Then siliconing all of the change of planes in this shower, and this silicone is again by TEC, the same exact color as the grout. And if you're going to be doing a shower, I would highly encourage you to get a silicone that is color matched to your grout. It's going to look a lot cleaner that way. I like to just apply a bead, spray it with some soapy water, and then hit it with a popsicle stick to clean it all up. And then sometimes even after that, I'll take my finger just to really smooth it over. We do not typically glue any of our trim, however, with this wall being ripe with water lines behind it, although there are protection plates, we still just want to be extra cautious, so getting some glue on this baseboard and then using the minimal amount of brads. And then for the pocket door here, using custom cut MDF to make our jambs for this door, as this was a very unusual wall, with that being a false wall built in front of this one with a pocket door framed into it. Just required a lot of customization. We were finally able to get our vanity in, size it, mark it on the wall with just a pencil, and then with that being done, we know with 100% certainty where everything has to be cut out, so we can get both of our plugs in down below, the sconces up above, and then get our water lines connected with some covers as well. For any of our miters with trim, we use this 2-part glue, get it bonded nice and tight, help prevent any future cracking, and also it allows us to install it as one piece, which is really, really nice. After that, we can get our baseboards in, and any brad nail holes we use spackle to fill, and along the tops or wherever trim meets wall, we go ahead and caulk it. Same thing where casing meets the door jambs. And finally, getting these plumbing fixtures in using a combination of Teflon and pipe dope to make sure everything is leak free. Just sliding this into place and then 3 screws into the framing behind it. Doesn't take a whole lot to secure a vanity. And here is the final result. If you made it this far, if I could maybe just ask you to consider hitting that like button. These videos take a long time to make, and that would really help me out. And subscribe if you want to see more of this content. If you're a fellow Canadian located within the Mississauga, Burlington, Oakville, Milton locations, my site will be down below in which you can submit a form. Maybe we can work together at some point. I do have an Amazon store link down below as well for many of the different tools and materials used in this project, so check that out. And if you do purchase something using that link, I do get a small commission, so it really helps me out as well. In terms of cost here, of known materials, so this was all of the stuff that I purchased, construction materials, labor, all that fun stuff, was about $26,000 US. And while I don't know the exact costs of the finishing materials that they purchased, I'd estimate based off the prices that I did see this to be at least 15 grand. These were high-end materials, and for high-end materials, they cost money. Go figure. And then of course throughout the video we had prices showing up. This is just a little compact list, and then I want to make note of the labor charge, because a lot of times in these videos I make, You see this labor charge for a project like this, and I get people saying, your prices are too low. And yeah, just a little warning, probably don't expect to get this type of renovation done for this price point. The reason why I price things sometimes a little low like this is because I know it'll make for good content. And it's pretty much that simple. I'm starting a business here. It's only my first year of business. So when I get a project like this one that I know is going to be really cool, I really want to secure that job. So I price it a little lower. That way I can have the privilege on working on something this nice. And speaking of how nice this turned out, or at least in my opinion, this could not have been possible without the help of Liz, who was the designer for this project. So I will put her Instagram in the description below, so be sure to check that out if you want to see some cool design inspiration ideas and more of her work. On top of that, of course, the glass work was subcontracted out. So Bola Glass is the subcontractor I use based here in the Toronto area. I'll put a link to their site as well if you're interested in that. Anyways, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you for doing so, and I hope you have a beautiful day.